Hi there. Welcome to the March overview slash April reading diary slash TBR update video. This is like a big catch-all, and I haven't done anything like this before, but the channel's still kind of young, so I kind of feel like I have the benefit of being able to experiment with the format somewhat. The month of March, I read a lot of books. Some of them I covered on the channel already, but there's a few things I read that I didn't make videos of. That could be because I didn't have that much to say about them, or I didn't think there was like a whole lot of interest in them. But I thought just for posterity's sake, I would talk a little bit about those, and then I could talk a little bit about the things I'm currently reading right now, which I've got a couple of books kind of on the hopper that I'm like right in the middle of, and then the things that I'm looking forward to reading, be it through this month in April or into May and even in June, depending on how far I get. With that said, let's talk about the past first. Okay, first up, I read my first Larry McMurtry book ever, and this is the Live Right collection of his Thalia stories. I only read the first story in this, which was called Horseman Passed By, which was his first book, but this is a pretty nice hardcover. It's got his first three books, Horseman Passed By, which I read, Leaving Cheyenne, his second book, and his third book, which I think was like the big, I guess, mainstream breakthrough, The Last Picture Show, which was made into that fine Peter Bogdanovich film and the like. Horseman Passed By. It's solid. It's good slice of life storytelling on a Texas ranch, basically. I mean, actually, I don't even know that I'd call it slice of life, really. It's like slice of life, but with like some eventful moments. And the things that I think stuck out to me the most about this book, it's about a guy who lives on his grandfather's ranch. More than anything, he wants to get out of town. He's got a really crappy older relative who I think is like the stepson of that grandfather. So I guess it's like his step uncle. This was made into a movie starring Paul Newman not too long after. So it probably made a pretty decent penny for McMurtry. And it's a pretty assured debut novel. Like you read it and you don't read like a lot of the first novel problems you read from like certain young readers, especially like in genre fiction. This is really more mainstream lit fic, but it has Western elements. I think the strengths of Horseman Passed By are really centered more on the yearning aspects and this idea of wanting to get out of town, wanting to like see what is beyond the Texas border and see what else the world has to offer. Those chapters, which I think are sort of like interspersed with chapters about like sick cattle and this horrible abusive relative named Hud that he's dealing with, and some of the bigger drama that had to be like put into the book to probably sell it more. And it's probably the thing that the movie's really focused on. I haven't seen the film, but I think the introspective nature of the book is what saved it. I think if the book was really concerned with like that rising action and the melodrama and a lot of those more perfunctory aspects of the book that I just don't think are quite as interesting, I would not have been as kind to it as I was as a reader. But I think the aspects that center on what more is there, and like the kids who are like obsessed with what's going on in Oklahoma City and the relationships he has with like his other young shit kicker friends, like those are things that I think make the book much more unique. And I'm excited to read more because I feel like those are the aspects that are like popping up in like his books later, especially The Last Picture Show, and maybe later his Houston novels like Terms of Endearment and Moving On and All My Friends Are Going to Be Strangers and all that. So I'm looking forward to reading more McMurtry. I would give this 3 stars, but not bad. I also read another Philip K. Dick, The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, which many people consider to be a major work of his and probably one of these books that's like a transitional work from the early 60s stuff to like what he would eventually produce with like Ubik and Valis and A Scanner Darkly. I tried to read this in March of 2020, right around the kickoff of the pandemic. I had read The Man in the High Castle as a part of this overriding hunger for more Philip K. Dick in my life, and I got this whole box set from Library of America. This was the next book after The Man in the High Castle, And I enjoyed it well enough, but I kind of dropped out halfway through. Now 5 years later, after having read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and Time Out of Joint and Confessions of a Crap Artist and some other of his works, I thought it was time to return to the one Philip K. Dick book that defeated me. And I like it pretty well. I finished it, at least. I can say that. I think the biggest problem for me is that it's like overstuffed. You've got these people who are like psychics who can determine who what things will be fashionable in the future, and they're as part of their employment. You've got these colonists out on Mars who are tripping balls to kind of keep themselves entertained because Mars is just so boring and horrible and life there is so bad. You've got aliens that potentially are trying to take over humanity through another drug. And you've also got things like evolution therapy. And it's just like thing on top of thing on top of thing. And it reminds me a little bit of the weakness of some of Dick's 50s works. It's better written than that. And there are sequences that I think are really clever. I particularly like the Martian colonist parts, which remind me a lot of like I don't know, like things like Roger and his wife Jane on Mad Men tripping on acid with all these other married couples and stuff. And I like how it's presented like they go into the bodies of like these Barbie dolls and sort of live out life as Barbie and Ken dolls, and like multiple men are inside the Ken doll and multiple women are inside the Barbie doll, and it allows for like some kind of like polyamorous stuff too without it like being polyamorous. It's kind of interesting, and I think one of the better parts of the book. And I think the ending is very good too, which I think is the part that makes it the most recommendable. It's really dark, and Dick gets tagged a lot, I think, for weak endings, even in some of his stronger books. But this one is probably the best of his endings I've read. I just wish the rest of the book had grasped me as much. I just felt like there was just a little too much happening, and I felt it was just a hair too unfocused. But still good enough to read, 3.5 stars. But I don't think it's one of his major works. I think that part is where it's just a hair overrated. Now it's time to talk about the books that I am currently reading. First up, Robert McCammon's Boy's Life, which really fills in a certain sort of thing I love, which is kids on bikes in small towns, which as a kid on a bike in a small town in the 1980s really speaks to me. Books like It and Summer of Night, that's just a milieu that I'm very attracted to. Whether or not I like the books or not is kind of beside the point. This is his big breakthrough work, I guess. I mean, Swan Song might be it, but I ended up collecting a bunch of these because I had seen him described as sort of an Alabama Stephen King, and as a guy from Georgia who kind of wants to write sort of like Stephen King sometimes, that was really appealing too. I had a bunch of these books, and I figure I better read one, decide if I like his writing. Smart thing to do before you buy more books by somebody, that's for sure. I have really mixed feelings, to be honest with you. I read the first few chapters and I thought to myself, man, this folksy writing is really grating on me. The second thought I had was, well, but the structure's pretty good. It's like episodic, and it's just, sort of this kid is getting into one scrape after another. This other event happens in this next chapter, and it's kind of like a bunch of short stories kind of connected together. But now I am at the halfway point in the book just about, and I'm annoyed again. There is a stretch of a couple of chapters that are about the Beach Boys song, I Get Around. And let me tell you, I really hate that kind of ephemeral pop culture referencing in books like this. It's so grating and really precious. And the fact, like, I can get through one chapter about it if it's some kid being like obsessed with the Beach Boys for a second, but I can't get through 2 chapters of it, especially when the second chapter is like a preacher who is like trying to call like the Beach Boys satanic, and there's a whole like bunch of drama around that. And to me, it feels like it's ripped right out of, even though it precedes it, but it feels like it's ripped right out of Walk Hard, Dewey Cox. You know what? You think you don't know what you mean when we say take my hand? And so now I have like this bad taste in my mouth about the book. I hope the rest of it like picks back up, but I'm struggling. I'm also struggling a little bit with like it's got like a Bagger Vance problem with like one character of color called the Lady that feels a little too magical for me, and it feels like it enters into like a really bad trope. And I I don't know that he's ever going to overcome that. It's the same problem that The Stand has. I'm going to try to finish it, I guess. If I can't take it and it becomes a DNF, my apologies, but that means I'll get more space on the shelf, and I could really use it. Reading The Two Towers by Tolkien. I have not read The Two Towers since middle school, and I read The Fellowship of the Ring, or reread The Fellowship of the Ring last year, and loved it. And I knew like I got to go back and read more and finish this thing, because I don't know that I've ever actually read The Return of the King. So this had to happen. Also, my partner told me that I couldn't buy the History of Middle Earth box sets until I read the rest of my Tolkien books, which is a really smart and good piece of guidance. So I've got The Two Towers, Return of the King, Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, and then I can potentially buy some of the Christopher Tolkien centenary sets to have on my shelf. But yeah, this is my copy that I got in middle school, and I've had it forever, just for, I guess, personal reasons, sentimental reasons, I guess you could say. But yeah, I have it, but I also got a nicer version with the Alan Lee illustrations behind me. It's still so good. I don't know what else to say about it that like a million people don't already talk about. If you want to hear about Tolkien and how great he is, go check out that Nerd of the Rings channel, But I am really so happy that I've been reading this, and I love how short it is too. And I don't know, there's just things I've caught that I haven't caught before. Like, I don't know, like I didn't realize how funny Tolkien was, but there's stretches here that are really humorous. And I think that's kind of like an underrated aspect of his writing. For example, I thought the competition between Legolas and Gimli when they're killing orcs at the Battle of Helm's Deep, and they're like, oh, I've got 21, I've got 22. I thought that came from the movie. No, man, it came from this book. And there's also like a really funny bit where the Gandalf and Aragorn and all them, they like come across Merry and Pippin again at the Tower of Orthanc, and Merry just starts talking about the history of weed and pipe smoking. And it just keeps going on and on. Gandalf's like, no, stop. So I'm really loving my reread of this, and I'm excited to read more. I will probably get to Return of the King sooner than I did to The Two Towers. And hey, I finally confirmed that The Two Towers are Orthanc and Barad-dûr. Anyway, it's great, and yeah, everyone should read Lord of the Rings. Now, let's talk about the future and the books that I'm hoping to read soon. First things first, The Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart. I watched the movie Excalibur for the first time last week. I guess I had no one in my life who loved me enough to tell me how awesome that movie was. But man, that movie is awesome. Do not listen to the haters. It rules, and it's like an entire mini-series fever dream of Arthurian legend shoved into 2.5 hours. Like, you think that minor character is only going to take up, a little bit of time in this movie? Heck no, he gets a 20-minute subplot right at the very end. It's great, and I loved it. And it made me want to read more stuff about King Arthur. I've had a copy of The Once and Future King for a few years now that I have left untouched for a while. I'm going to read it absolutely now. This is like the time for me to do so. But I also understand that The Crystal Cave is like the other really recommendable first step into reading sort of modern Arthurian tales. And whereas The Once and Future King is like a big, broad spanning thing about Arthur's childhood from the Sword and Stone all the way to like his eventual demise, Crystal Cave is about Merlin's childhood. And I found this pretty cheaply, and I thought, what the heck, this is the time to do it. So we'll be doing that soon. Of course, I've talked about this already, but The Lions of Al-Rassan by Guy Gavroche, not much else to say. Might be a book I take to the beach with me next month. It is like the kickoff point of his shared world history, the world of Jad, and Moorish Spain, analog, yeah. Inverted World by Christopher Priest. I have yet to read a Christopher Priest book. I have this. I have The Prestige. But the recent video by Stephen Andrews, the Outlaw Bookseller, about the glamour made me want to read some of the Priest I had before I jumped into that book. And my buddy, back here locally, Matt, he also was a big fan of this. So I thought, now's the time to crack open one of these NYRBs. And I started reading this a little bit, and it gives off like a bit of Snowpiercer sort of energy, but with like some of the, I don't know, politicking of a Dune. So more to come, but this will probably get read sooner than almost anything else on the pile. I'd like to read my first Parker book soon too, which is The Hunter by Richard Stark, aka Donald Westlake. I just every once in a while I just want to read like a good grody crime thing, and this is so short. So, and I've got a few of them, and since they're so short, it'd be easy to plow through them. So this will be the next crime thing I take on. And then lastly, on the prose front, I picked up a hardcover of Goblin by Josh Mallerman. I read the prologue of this when I was in New York last year at the New York Public Library, which I always should recommend to somebody who goes to New York and wants to like just sit around and read books all day. That's a perfect place to do it. It's so impressive. Yeah, Goblin. It's 6 novellas all set in the same town called Goblin with a framing story. I've been holding off on reading this for a while because the book I wrote is almost, well, I won't say it's like the same, but it's very similar in concept, and structurally is very similar. And I just didn't want to be influenced in any way by something that was that similar. But now I can finally read it and enjoy it. And we'll see if Mallerman's writing's for me. You know, he's mostly known as the Bird Box guy, but he kind of pumps out a lot of stuff fairly recently. And he comes recommended as somebody, if you like Stephen King, he's one of these like younger horror writers that kind of writes in the same vein. So really interested to see how this goes. And I haven't talked about comic books much on this channel because I don't read a lot of comics anymore. I used to. I was a comic book reader for like 30 years, and I even wrote for one of the bigger comic book websites, which I've talked about just briefly. But I thought I'd talk about some of the things that I have on the pile that I will be reading in the next month or so. First up, Bowling with Corpses by Mike Mignola and Dave Stewart. I love Hellboy. Hellboy's like my favorite comic book thing that's like a shared universe, and on the action side particularly. And this is like his new universe that he started outside of Hellboy. I know he's worked on some other things called the Outerverse, which is like, whatever. But this is like the new thing that he is like doing basically solo, though I understand he's also kind of working on some new books with his other collaborator, Ben Stenbeck. My understanding is it's like a bunch of like folk tales all sort of tied together in some sort of loose way. I don't know much else about it other than it's Mike Mignola. I love his art, I love his writing, and he's a big influence on me, so can't wait. And this is the first book in my box set, which is like over there, of my Love and Rockets collection. I spent a very pretty penny getting that from Fantagraphics. It's like a $400 box set. It's probably cheaper on retailers now, but I bought it like when it came out. And I am a mega Love and Rockets fan. To me, it's probably like the only comic book that truly matters. If you don't know anything about it, it's like the Hernandez brothers have been producing this book since like the early 80s. It precedes the band Love and Rockets, which stole the name from the comic. It's like half the stuff are made by Jaime Hernandez, which is like it's like Southern California queer punk rockers. And it's like they age in real time along with the book, and now currently I think they're in like their 50s, pushing even into their 60s now, but they start in their teens at the beginning of the series, and it's pretty neat. And then the other half is by his brother Gilbert, which is sort of this 100 Years of Solitude type story in a Central American town called Palomar. And then all of the extremely wild things that happen there. It's incredible. And this collection comes from the first 50 edition, which is like this big box set that has like the first 50 issues of Love and Rockets, probably the greatest run of comic books ever produced. This has the first 5 issues, and it's pretty wild to read it and see like Yeah, like, you know, the Jaime side, which becomes like this grounded punk rock thing, originally was about like dinosaurs and spaceships in South America. Yeah, and Gilbert was doing like really ultra sort of like monster kaiju stories, and finally, you know, they gel right around the third and fourth issue of the series. But it's pretty wild to see these guys grow and change in such short order. And boy, I tell you, if you've never read Love and Rockets before, please, you know, ask me where to start. I would love to talk to you guys about Love and Rockets and tell you how amazing it is and how much you need to read it. COPRA by Michelle Fife. Michelle's a good pal of mine. We've been friends since like 2012, really. Yeah, COPRA, it's incredible. It's the best one-man comic. Michelle does everything. He writes, draws, colors, letters, inks, everything. That is being produced today. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like, if you've never read it before, I highly recommend it. It is imagine like the Suicide Squad concept, but with like an indie creator edge. Imagine like a Suicide Squad where there's like no limits in terms of like how characters can be treated, what characters can die, what their personal lives are like. COPRA delves into all of that, and it is just like this beautiful melange of like all of his artistic interests. I think it has like art that just absolutely pops, and the storytelling is incredible. The reason I'm rereading it is because he's actually producing what's currently now known as the storyline The Death of COPRA, which is like the last sort of like 4 issues of the series, and then a big 50th issue is coming out to wrap the whole thing up. But yeah, 50 issues of self-produced comics has to be applauded. So if you've never read a COPRA, this is a great addition to get to. This is like the Image master collection. Like, it's like oversized, but there are also like these rounds that are like collected. Like, you've got COPRA round 6, for example. And I pulled that out particularly because if you look at the back, you'll see a quote from yours truly when I was doing comics journalism and comics reviews. I called it the best adventure comic on the stands, Kyle Pinion, The Beat. So yeah, always pretty great. It's probably my best pull quote ever, though I also had a few television ones, I think, for like Doom Patrol and stuff. Remember that show? Anywho, that's what I have read, that's what I'm reading, and that's what I plan to read over the next few weeks to month or so. Have you read any of this stuff? What are you planning on reading in the coming months? I'd love to hear from you guys. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and hey, keep on reading.